It's 9 o'clock.
Compared to the others.
All right, friends. Team, are we ready? It is 9 o'clock. Let's start. I'm a lefty, so I need to put this on this side. Okay.
You don't.
It is 9 o'clock on February 4th, 2025. We are kicking off our special meeting and work session agenda and got some really exciting things to talk about. Good morning, all. So I'm actually looking forward to some of these presentations. Okay, so can we first remind our folks that to view the live stream video of this meeting, please go to Lewis Palmer School District 38 YouTube page, www.youtube.com, user LPSD community. Ms. Wood, would you take our roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Norris.
Here.
Dr. Schwartz. Dr. Shank.
Here.
Ms. Upchurch.
Here. Let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Wood, would you lead us? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, so the reason that today is also not just a working meeting, although most of the day is a working session for discussion, we do have one action item, and that is B1, where the board will discuss and consider an appointment of the position of our acting superintendent to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Dr. Stacy Dattery on January 21st. That resignation was a mutual separation for the betterment of our students and our staff. And so I also want to take the time as a board to acknowledge that sometimes we need to own that it didn't quite work. And so we are focusing on moving forward and for our students and our staff in the future of our school district. So that's what we are doing today. And so I'm going to, Ms. Wood, would you pull up that slide?
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I guess we don't need that yet, right? That's for our next one, our discussion. Okay. So we have to consider approved position of acting or interim superintendent.
Ms. Upchurch, I'd like to make a motion
Yes, sir.
to approve the appointment of Ms. Amber Wetstein to serve as the interim superintendent of Lewis Palmer School District 38, effective immediately through June 30th, 2025, or until a new superintendent is hired.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's been a first and a second to approve the appointment of Ms. Amber Wetstein to serve as our interim superintendent, effective immediately through June 30th or until a new superintendent is hired. Do we have discussion?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things. One is, with respect to this transition, first of all, Ms. Wetstein, are you willing to do and interested in doing this?
I am happy to step in, and we have a strong team, and our team will certainly lead us forward during this transition.
Okay, so thank you. Secondly, thank you for being willing to do the extra duty of your current role plus the superintendent role. Third, as one board member, I certainly concur with President Upchurch that ultimately it's our hire, we own it. And if we made a mistake, we own it and we do something about it instead of allowing it to happen to us. So I applaud my peers for stepping up and acting. Sometimes when you act, it creates some ripples. But ultimately, it's the right thing to do for the community and the kids and the staff. That being said, at some juncture, we need a permanent superintendent. And what I would like to propose is that we consider a down window for maybe 30, 60, up to 90 days, and then start to begin that process in the spirit of doing quality diligence and still allowing the the team that's in place to regain the momentum and put things in place such that the district flows smoothly and successfully at minimum through the end of this school year and possibly early into next school year. So it's just something for thought as we move forward to sort of set the expectations.
So I think we can discuss next steps during our discussion on the next agenda item as
Okay.
well,
Okay.
if that would.
Sure.
So I appreciate that, because that was my question is, are you willing to serve? And where I think that this has value, if I may take a privilege as a board chair, is this allows for stability and continuity in our buildings. It allows us to focus on our students and on our staff with some comfort and ease. There's always some uneasiness, and this creates the least amount of distraction to keep our ship moving forward. We've got some big rocks right now, and I think it speaks volumes as to Ms. Wetstein's positive character and her commitment to our district. We've been down this road before, and you've stayed the course and stayed positive, and the feedback from our staff and our community members has been that you have been a strong leader and that you have continued to stay positive and lean into student learning and making sure that we're staying on a path and keeping track with. We have a lot of big goals and visions, and we've put this team to a lot of tasks of a lot of things to accomplish. And so you've really stepped up, and I appreciate that. And so as we move forward, our school district, I think, is in capable hands, and you as a leader can continue as our interim superintendent. And we will discuss next steps in our next agenda item. But I applaud that the board and D38 leadership are remaining committed to keeping our staff, our families, and our community informed throughout this transition. And I think that that's important, that as we are ensuring that we have that trust and that support, that we are continually communicating and that we are continually doing check-ins. I think that's important as well. But this is the discussion part of our vote. And we can dive deeper into discussions of next steps, if that's okay with you, Mr. Schwartz.
Very.
Anybody else want to add to discussion before we vote?
I mean, I share your sentiments, and I think the most important thing right now is stability and letting everybody kind of take a break and calm down. And we have a great leadership team that I have absolute faith in.
Yep. Well, if there's no more discussion on this particular item right now, then let's go ahead and do a roll call.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Mr. Norris?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Dr. Shank?
Aye.
Ms. Upchurch?
Aye. Thank you, Ms. Wetstein.
Thank you for your trust.
Okay, we are moving on to C1, which is to discuss next steps. And we'll dive right in. So right now, we've just voted to appoint Ms. Wetstein as our interim superintendent. And this, obviously, with having that interim superintendent, ensures that we have stability, consistency, while we're maintaining that focus on our strategic goals and on supporting our schools, supporting our staff, supporting our students. And it allows our district leadership to complete the current year effectively and strategically. And there's a lot of preparation upcoming, really in short order for the next school year. And so this does definitely prioritize making sure that we're staying on that same path. And it provides time for us as a board to consider the options moving forward. Now, Mr. Schwartz, to your question, I think one of the things we need to make sure, this is me advocating as, this is my proposal and my thoughts only. I just want to make that clear that in full transparency, as we're discussing this was just things that I was coming up with of what does it look like now. And so this is a slide I put together for the board to consider and thoughts to consider. So this is the first time we're able to actually have this discussion. And obviously, when you're having discussions, transparency can sometimes be fun and messy, and it's important that we are focusing on moving forward and learning from things we can do better in the past. So what I saw as opportunities moving forward is, I think it's important personally that we are gathering feedback from our community. What I have recognized is in our original search, something that I think we could have improved on, that when we engaged with our search firm, one of the key pieces of that search that was missing is, and the feedback I've heard, is engaging with smaller committees, engaging with our staff committees, engaging with the staff collaboration committee. And we did that, but we didn't do that in full, smaller interview processes along the way. So as we move forward, I think it's imperative that we are continuing to lean in on the feedback and the discussions and deliberation from our principals to our staff, our community, and PCAC, FTC, our staff collaboration committee, and on options going forward. And these were just 3 options that popped up that rose to the top. Certainly not necessarily the full scope, but opportunities before we go to June 3rd. And as we go into June 30th, we could re-engage with the previous search firm, McPherson and Jacobson. That is they have a guarantee. There is not a, when I've talked to Mr. Cooper, there is not a cutoff date on that. So we can look at that for the future. We can explore alternative search processes or firms, or explore that alternative could be something of deciding that our internal candidate is, we had 2 strong internal candidates. And I want to remind the board of that when we went into our deliberation process, if you all recall, we deliberated an entire day because the decision was extremely competitive and extremely tough. And we deliberated for a long time going into where we are now before. So we had 2 strong candidates rise to the top. And so we could certainly lean into those 2 candidates that rose to the top. We could evaluate the feasibility of a shared leadership team approach. There's some articles and some studies that are out there that show that that could be a possibility. This is D38. The most important thing for me as one board member is that we are doing this alongside our community and leaning into making sure that we are staying focused on why we're here and what we do, and that is focusing on our students and our staff. So with that, thoughts?
So I've been thinking about this a lot, and again, as one board member, we have a lot to do. And one of the things that I keep coming back to is keeping our focus on what we have to do with the incredibly good people we have here with us, that the executive team, and not splitting our focus into the huge things we have to do, and a superintendent search, which was, I would like us to consider putting even that off, and just having an interim superintendent help us through this particular period of time, seeing how well we can all get these things done, and worrying about the superintendent search if we decide to do one later. I've really thought deeply about it, and I feel fairly strongly about it, but as I've told you guys in the past, if there is a need to do something different than that, and that's what you guys want to do, I will be on board for that as well. But I really think that this is not a time to be looking to change leadership. We've got great leadership, and as we said earlier, we made a mistake. Own the mistake figure out what to do better, and move on. That's just my thinking.
This is discussion time. Mr. Brown? Mr. Schwartz?
I mean, I don't have a lot to add other than what I said. I mean, it's important that we keep the stability and the continuity, and I think with everything we have going on, we don't need a distraction of a change in leadership right now, so I'm all for definitely putting this off for a little bit and letting things calm back down.
And we have leadership, and we have what we need right now to get through what we need to get done and what they need to get done. The superintendent search will be a bit of a distraction. A lot of work, not just on our part, but theirs. And I don't know that we can afford taking our eye off the big things, CTE Center, transitions in Homeschool Academy. I mean, these are, and the other things we have, there are huge things that need to be done and need to be done well and right and with little distraction. Plus you guys run this school district. I mean, that's a lot all by itself without these big things. It's huge. I don't want us to distract from those things, and we've got people who can do it. And that may help us focus better, may help them focus better without the distraction of a superintendent search. And I mean, interim superintendent can go for how long?
So by law, superintendent search, from what I've understood in reaching out to McPherson and Jacobson, is an interim superintendent has to be revisited in 9 months. So it can go up to 9 months.
Okay.
It can go as little as 9 days or as long as 9 months, and then you revisit it. And then there's school districts that have had interim school superintendents for longer, but they just have to revisit it, from what I understand.
I'd like to consider that 9-month period of time to get these things done, or some version thereof.
Everybody's quiet. This is discussion time.
Okay, then I'll discuss. A couple things. One is, we're fortunate to have the luxury to have a team that's in place, been in the district, worked in the buildings, and worked here. So the capacity that we have in our staff for continuity is strong. That being said, someday we're going to have a full-time official superintendent. And the longer past a cooling window that we wait to do it, the more we delay the inevitable, whether it's from within or from without. Having said that, with full respect, 2 of the finalists for the last one are in the room, and I want to make sure we're respectful of whatever they choose to do with their careers or not going forward. But the fact of the matter is, whenever we open up the search, that's when the candidates matter. Not the day before, not the day after. Okay? So wherever people are in their personal and professional and health lives, that will determine their interest and willingness and passion to go for that particular opening on that day when it's announced. So the more we speculate about it, and there will be conversations and speculation anyways, it's what human beings do. The more we speculate about it, the more we just create fetter that's unnecessary. But at some juncture, it is our job to make sure that there's a full-time 3 to 10-year individual that can be in that role and help us keep our kids safe, well-educated, and move us to the next level of the dynamics that are happening in this environment. An example of that dynamic is the CT facility, right? And what's happening around us. Employers are not requiring a degree anymore. Why? Because they care more about the nature of the person and the skill set she or he or they bring to the table on day one. So it's incumbent on us to maintain the academics, but perform the art of the and, which is add something to our offering in those areas, and we're doing it. So we need to consider these things in terms of when and how we do the search. On a personal note, and based on my business experience, I think 9 months is a bit long, because now we're entering into a new school year, and one could argue disruption is more during a school year than in between them. But I don't know that we have to settle on a particular date at this meeting, but I do think it's valuable that we settle on a range. And based on the dynamics, as we get near that range, we make a call. And the one thing this team's done quite well is not kicked the can down the road, which, by the way, our predecessors did a beautiful job of that. They did some wonderful things, but we've made some decisions recently that could have and should have been made many, many, many years ago. Yeah? So I would argue sometime in the next 90 days, we should have a defined window of when we want to do this. And we should probably have a range before we exit this room today.
If I may, Ms. Upchurch, I believe at one point you alluded to a certain time frame that's far better for doing a search due to people's availability and when they generally accept positions and things like that. Could you speak to that?
Yes, so typically you see school districts entering into searches starting in December, because starting the phase one, there's several phases in a search. So phase one is usually kicked off about November, December is ideal, because you're looking to fill that That's a discussion that has occurred since I've been on this board for 7 years now. And when we've done community engagements and community polling, CTE always rises to the top. Addressing the learning needs of the students that are in Grace Best always rises to the top. So the fact that we are actually doing the work that needs to be done instead of kicking that can, and that we're able to do it without going to taxpayers because we were able to find a way to finally be creative. We've kicked that can because we haven't had the dollars. And so we found a way to be creative and address those capital needs and address the learning priorities of our students. So that is something particularly this spring and going into next school year, that is going to be, that's a heavy lift. And the 5 of us as board members, this community elected us to make sure that we are the voices of this community. So making sure that we are being present and that we are leaning into our community and that we are supporting our staff and our students, I think is where we need to be having our focus personally. I like that we have, per our vote just now, that we have June 30th as a time to revisit this and look at next steps. This gives us an opportunity to really grow and make sure that the team is growing and make sure that we're supporting our building leaders and our principals. Our principals are our boots on the ground in this school district. And they're the ones that have the first contact with our parents and with our students and our staff. And so I think really supporting our buildings is important too, and I don't want to lose sight of that. Also remembering that our one employee is our superintendent, and now and Amber is our superintendent. You're interim, but you're a superintendent right now. So our one employee is, we as a board need to make sure that we are respecting that leadership and that ability for our superintendent to move forward. And then in June, we have a set date, we have a set plan to what are our next steps. And so I would encourage us to be in that cooling period and allow our superintendent to do the job and allow our leadership team and our staff to lean into our students until such date. That's just my opinion. And my opinion is worth the sense I have in the 2 pennies I have in my purse.
So maybe one other thing to actually, Patty, you have something else you would like to?
No, go ahead.
So one other thing I thought about a month ago was there's a difference between 2 very important things. So I made a small investment at Staples. Everybody remember this?
I remember.
That was easy.
Part of the dignified process of a board meeting. So there's certainly this option, right?
I don't know what that option is.
Pushing the easy button, doing the easiest thing that's in front of us. Then there's this option. I'm not sure if you guys can read this.
Can't.
This was just a little personal innovation. Not very technical, sorry, Tom.
What is it?
This says correct or right. And so it's incumbent upon us to not necessarily do what's easiest, but to do what's right. And if we do that well, and I think what we just went through last month is a nice example, right? What comes out on the other side is good. And then it becomes organic. And then when you've done the correct or the right thing,
That was easy.
it does become easy and normal and organic. And so I made a small $25 investment in this to prove the point that we need to make sure that we're doing the right and correct thing as we consider the long-term 36 to 60-month leader for our 6,500 kids and 29,000 constituents. And just to reiterate, I'm in passionate agreement that we need a window now to enable the quality team of professionals we have in place to do their job. And and that one of the key pieces of feedback that we got from the buildings was a concern about academics. And we also have a testing window coming up, and with full respect for the fact that numbers on a page don't necessarily indicate what an individual student has learned, absorbed, and or retained, the macro piece is a key indicator. And those key indicators do a lot for us, right? They maintain distinction, they make us attractive from an employee standpoint and from a property value and a quality community standpoint. So it makes it really, really important. So I'm in favor of this window. Conversely, I'm also very in favor of us making sure we don't do the easiest thing, but the correct thing. And the correct thing is really understanding what the next superintendent's characteristics, personality traits, and key professional capacities need to be to do all the things that we talked about. If we refine our definition of that from a year ago or so, then we'll be able to make a quality decision which ultimately leads us to the correct decision.
I don't disagree.
Hang on, it's a double negative. You can't do that in education.
I can.
I think you just did.
Yes, that's exactly right. I don't disagree. I just, and it may be more my lack of understanding of the superintendent search process. I don't think we're saying anything different. I just think the how is my vision of the how is just slightly different. That's all. And I'm not sure if how I envision that is even possible, but yeah, I don't think I am looking for the easy button. I definitely don't. And the last time wasn't easy, and it was also wrong. So it's caused me to rethink.
Can you expand on when you said the last statement you made that
The last time we went through it, we went through the process. It was pretty grueling, and we all agreed, and it was wrong. So that has caused me to rethink in my own mind why, or how more than why. So I am thinking that we have knowledge that we didn't have before, which is part of the process of failing. And I always think that if you fail, as long as you can use that failure as tuition, you didn't fail. You just learned. And that's pretty painful, but acceptable. We can learn a lot from failure. In fact, we often do. So I'm thinking the how might be somewhat different, because the other how did not get us to a good place. And I would like to short circuit that if possible.
Any thoughts on what might be different?
again, I'm not sure that what, I would like us to get together, if possible, get together and rethink what process we want to go through, the process first. What process we would like to go through as a team to get to a better result. And my hope is that there's some options. President Upchurch provided, 3 of those, and those are potential options, as is thinking through the process to get there. Because the process we followed got us to a bad result, or just not a result that worked.
Right.
For her or us. And I would like to rethink, since we agreed as a group that we thought, we all agreed and made a decision that didn't work well for her or us. So that's not something I think needs to be repeated.
So I think it's also worth noting that D38 has experienced longevity with our superintendents over the years.
Yes.
Dr. Summers was with us for 5 years. Karen Broft was with us for 5 years. Ted Bauman was with us for 20, and there was the beloved, not Ray Blanche, Kilmer, and he laughed. Kilmer are examples of the longevity and the successes we have here in D38. There are school districts. This is, although it's not meant to be dismissive, but this is common in other school districts as well, with the longevity of superintendents lasting about 2 years. I also think it is worth noting that as we move forward, our school district is in capable hands. And as leadership will continue under Amber Wettstein, and as we as a board discuss next steps, this appointment could lead to a longer-term fit. And it's interesting because other board members across the state have reached out in different districts and shared that from some of these growing pains came some of the best superintendents to ever serve from within, that they had hidden gems that they didn't realize. So to your point, I think when we move forward and we look at it as a learning opportunity and an opportunity to move as a community together. And I think that some of the things I learned was smaller community interview committees is something that D38 has requested, and that was something that we failed to do. And it was based on advice. It was based on the industry norms of today, but we're, at the risk of sounding weird, we are not normal. We're D38. We are one big, happy, loving, dysfunctional, and successful family. I think that one of the other things I've learned is, not that I learned it was, we already knew it, we already know this, but a reminder of the importance of board presence and the importance of leadership presence in our community, in our committees, in our organizations. And I think that that's something that moving forward, the 5 of us need to be mindful of and committed to, is our presence. Because when there's a void of communication, then people put their own narratives in it, and I have heard some gossip that I think is unfair and unjust. So I think having that presence and that ability to communicate and be authentic and relational and be who we are This is the business of human beings, right? And our human beings are our students and our staff, along with our community. So to your point, Mr. Schwartz, I think it is important that we do have a long-term plan, but I think that we have an opportunity now to allow Amber to lead us through this year and potentially see what it looks like at the end of the school year, at the end of June. And I am confident that we are in good hands right now. And what's been really awesome is through this journey, how many folks have come forward and shared their enthusiasm and their endorsement for us to move in this direction internally with Ms. Wetstein at the helm. We have a ship and we're sailing through waters, and sometimes those seas are bumpy and sometimes those seas are smooth. So let's make sure that we are sailing smoothly, because we have some really neat things at the end of this journey. We've got a lot to look forward to coming up next school year. But please advocate. Thoughts? What we want to do next steps? Are we good with moving forward? Do we want to talk some more? This is work session time, so.
Do we have a range, a window?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Let's see if we can define some kind of plan moving forward.
Right.
I think I heard you just say you wanted to rest on your laurels.
No, I said these are not resting on laurels, and to your point, these are not easy decisions. I think we have not taken the easy button at all. No, I said that I think that we've set a time window, and I think our time frame is June 30th.
So what happens in June? Do we start a search? Do we re-engage this discussion? What happens in June?
My thought was that we re-engage this discussion at that time. I think it's too premature at this juncture to make a definitive decision on what that looks like.
So given the fact that it's a minimum 90-day process, if we run a T-minus schedule, that might be one alternative way to look at this, right? If we had our druthers, when would we like to make a superintendent permanent?
Well, I think that's why we have that June 30th date to come back to. Is it going to be permanent? Is it going to not be permanent? Is it what does that look like?
Yeah, but ultimately, we still need a target
Okay,
as to when we would like to have a permanent superintendent in
I
place.
mean, obviously, it would be great to have a permanent superintendent by the beginning of the next school year, right? I mean, so
Okay, hang on.
with T-minus, moving back from there, then when do we need to revisit? And revisit has to happen before starting.
Right, it's a T-minus schedule.
Yeah, so it's very short then, and I'm fearful that starting soon will distract us from the big things that need to be done, will be more difficult for our team. And so if it's at all possible for us to think of an alternate schedule, I'm just thinking out loud, and I'm not even sure this makes sense, okay? Of an alternate schedule of December, that allows this team that I'm perfectly confident can get these big things done, especially without the distraction of a superintendent search, and give us time to figure out our process and what to do. And that means having an interim for longer, or not, depending on what we decide as a process.
I want to give my fellow board members their voice, and I want to make sure that we are discussing this. I also want to make sure we're mindful of time. I am going to put it out there that I, as one board member, and this is just me advocating from my perspective, am not in favor of engaging in a search right now. I also, as one board member, have concerns about engaging in a search in the fall when there are 2 board seats on the ballot. That's just my opinion for what it's worth. And I think that the 30th allows us an opportunity to revisit, and it allows us the opportunity to be nimble, because 9 months can be a short time, or it can be a long time. And anybody who's gone through having kiddos recognizes what 9 months looks like. It can breeze by, or it can be painful. So I think that this gives us an opportunity to engage with our community as well, and with those getting feedback from our various stakeholder groups. So I think before we can even narrow down anything further, we really do need to get feedback from our stakeholder groups and then revisit this. But that's me.
So can we come up with a date by which we will do certain things, such as revisit the process that we're going to follow, and engage some of our stakeholders about that process, and then come up with a plan?
May I?
Yes, please.
We're sort of dancing around a commitment here, okay? So I'm going to make a proposal that's very defined. It's February 4th. Would we take a momentum recapturing and consistency window of February, March, and April? And then we begin the process of looking for a permanent senior executive in May, and we take May, June, and July to do it. And if we don't find one, then we can continue in the current model. And if we do find one, then we can start pretty close to the beginning of the school year. And that also gives August, September, and October for that another 90-day window until the 2 new board members come on. And I keep thinking back to what Dr. Schenk said in her first year, which is, I am new and I'm just learning. We almost believed you for the first 6 months, but after that we knew you knew what you were doing. Right? Those of us who've been here 5 or 6 years, we can go the other way now. But the point is, it puts some definition around it.
Can you restate, because I'm
Yeah, 90 days, 90 days, and 90 days.
So
Okay.
February through April, May through July, and then there's another one. Tell me what happens in each one.
So now through February, March, and April, we enable everything that we've been talking about. Right? Everybody on the board agrees we need a window now to enable the principals and the Big Red team to build positive momentum and focus on the academics the daily stuff and the additional big rocks that we have in front of us that are big projects, but completely within the realm and the capacity of the professionals we have hired to do these jobs. It is what they do, right? Melissa and Brett, how often in your previous district did you bring a new building online, whether you remodeled it or purchased it or built it?
We did it 5 or 6 times over the course of a dozen years.
Right, so every other year.
Yeah.
So it became, routine's a bad word, but it became something you were very accustomed to, and it wasn't necessarily always a heavy lift. It was just part of your job, yeah? So we have the right people in place to do this work. But, so the first 90 days would be just taking a pause and allowing the district to roll back into the place it was and focus on the academics and the couple incremental big rocks that we have. The next 90 days would be to begin the process and go through it to find a permanent leader. The final 90 days would be to enable opportunity to have that permanent leader be in place prior to 2 new board members coming online. And we're also making the assumption that none of the other 3 board members would have something happen in their life that would cause them to leave the area or not be able to serve. Right? And that's part of our diligence and part of what we're supposed to do. Right? It's not good for us to leave our future successors undone work.
What are your thoughts on the vehicle we use to do that search?
I was going to ask you to do it. You got a problem with that?
That's something we're going to handle.
So, in all seriousness, I think the easy button is to use a firm that we thought did a quality job and that we're used to working with and we're comfortable working with. The question is, given the results, how credible is that firm or that firm representative with the board? And if the answer, I mean, it's binary. It either is or it isn't. And so the question is, if it isn't, can it be repaired or can it in this time window? And if the answer is it can, then that would be a logical decision. If it can't, then it's okay too. This is business. It's not personal.
So I think 90-day check-ins, because that's what we would require, that's what we required of our new superintendent anyway. So check-ins to make sure we're on the same track, I'm in favor of. I am not in favor of beginning a process in April. I think, first of all, that doesn't give, I think we need, that's in the middle of testing, that's in the middle of re-engaging for what does the following school year look like. You're working on this process through the middle of the summer when I just shared that I think staff needed to have their voice heard more, and when staff are out, teachers in particular are not in, are out for the season, they're not around to be able to be engaged in that process. And I think that it is very disruptive to, when we're trying to focus on academics and we're focusing on buildings, wanting to re-engage in a process starting in April, I think is disruptive. I think you're going to find the types of candidates that are going to come forth are going to be disruptor candidates, not candidates that are looking for, I don't think you're going to find candidates looking for a turnkey school district. I think you're going to find disruptors. And I think that we have a perfectly capable person to lead us right now.
Yeah, I'm not disputing the capacity of the team in any form or fashion. All I'm saying is at some juncture we need to do this. And doesn't have to happen immediately, and although it's a small window, my proposal based on listening was we start in May after CMAS testing. But it is valid to consider that there may be some people that aren't available from a staff standpoint during the summer. Conversely, if we get ahead of that, then we can mitigate it. But more importantly is, there's 5 people on the board. And the question is, what are the personality traits, skill sets, passions, and characteristics that our next superintendent should have? And when do we want them to begin?
Isn't that June 30th date when that's why we have this date set at June 30th to revisit this?
So then we wouldn't want them to begin, that the absolute categorical soonest that would happen then would probably be in the October timeframe.
So I want to make sure I understand, are you advocating that irregardless that of these 3 options, it's as I'm learning, as I'm listening, I think what you're advocating for is that irregardless, bullet point number 1 is the one that you are wanting to urge the board to consider. Is that fair?
No,
Okay.
but thank you for bringing it up. I think the board should determine if the firm and the particular representative we worked with before are credible enough to re-engage them. And whatever the board determines, that's what we should do.
So,
But before we worry about the tactic, I think we should set the goal.
so are you wanting to move the discussion from June 30th up to May? Is that what you're, okay,
No.
I'm sorry.
Let's just back into this on a T-minus basis, like Mr. Norris recommended. What day do we want a permanent superintendent in place? Should it be a Wednesday or a Thursday?
Depends on person. Depends.
Good answer. Do we want?
I think we should maybe agree as a group on what should be on the list first.
Okay.
And use that to set up the process. Because the process for those 3 and another 2 or 3 I can think of will have different processes.
Under number 2, exploring alternative search processes or firms, one of the processes is looking external, one of the processes could be looking internal. So I want to make sure that we're making that clear.
Really, bullet 2 is a subset of bullet 1, right? Or vice versa.
Sure. I'd say vice versa, yeah. Bullet 1 fits into,
Yeah.
well, not
I
necessarily.
think Dr. Schenk brings up a great point. Why don't we just boil this down to 2 simple common denominators? What are the traits, characteristics, and capacities we want to make sure the next SUP has? And in what time window do we want them to be permanent?
And I'm not sure that we've got the time here today to figure that out, but can we figure that out as a group and take whatever time is needed to have, I mean, I think the list of things we were looking for probably hasn't changed much. But it's good to revisit it to make sure. I don't think that was part of the problem. That wasn't a problem for us, I don't believe. We just didn't get there with that list, which was a problem. And I'm not saying figure out why or who's wrong or whatever, but we didn't. So I think we should review that list, and I think we have it. We have that list. and then figure out what process we want to follow to find that person. I'm not sure what that looks like in terms of meetings and stuff like that, or even if it's possible. That's something I don't know.
So last time we did that at a retreat.
So
So we have to reevaluate the interim position in 9 months, correct?
So according to our vote, the vote we just voted on, June 30th, by June 30th, so the June meeting that we just voted on.
So every 90 days.
Yeah,
we-
so yes. Which is June 30th is when what we just voted on. And I think during that time, that gives us the opportunity, I think the first step, we've been talking about what are our next steps. I think we're forgetting about the first step. The first step is gathering feedback from our various stakeholders and our groups. I think that's our first step. And then we move on. I think engaging with our staff and our parents, our FTC, our PCAC, our collaboration committee, which have their meeting tomorrow, as a matter of fact. I think that is what's important going forward. And then moving forward this semester, and then re-engaging in this discussion of next steps on June 30th.
So is it okay? Are you okay with dual pathing that? Can we get started on that and dual path that process while we're allowing the school the stability to continue to operate?
What do you mean dual path?
And to start working on the community feedback.
Oh, absolutely. That's essential.
So I think maybe October, November is a realistic time frame for somebody permanent.
It could be before that
I'm
or after that.
I'm just saying we can take our time on the process and dual path it if everybody so chooses that. I mean, I like that direction because it's going to take us a while to get through this process, so. I just don't think, I mean, we need to engage the community first and get some feedback, and I don't know how we legally do that. We're kind of tied by.
How we legally do it is we as a board need to be present. We need to be in these committee meetings. We need to be at the Chamber of Commerce. We need to be in our schools. We as individual board members getting that feedback from our staff.
Any kind of public settings that we need to have and set up at Big Red and.
That could be valuable. I'm a big fan of town halls, but sometimes they get messy, but sometimes I'm a fan of them.
So, can we all 5 come up with a schedule of what our vision looks like?
Second.
And how do we share that legally with each other? And how do we come to a collective agreement on what we need to do moving forward?
You come to that decision like we are doing right now in the public.
Okay. So can we do a special meeting simply to come up with a vision and a process in discussion with each other, and maybe allow for feedback there or not, and then put it into place. I mean, we certainly had a lot of input from the public the last time, so that wasn't something missing. It just wasn't done in the way I think you're visioning this, which is a good process as far as I'm concerned, but it's also I'm not sure that because the people who know most about what happened last time are in this room for the most part, many of them. I'm just worried that no matter who you get feedback from, they're not likely to understand what occurred and how it occurred and why it was problematic. So I'm not sure that it'll prevent a bad process or a bad result. The process seemed perfect at the time.
So in the,
Sorry about that, about inability to think through that. It's just like I don't. If we substitute these people for these people, I don't know that. I mean, yes, we've got to do this with our community, of course.
well, so, yes, I think what we learned is, in the past, we have engaged with staff committees have interviewed those people, and we did not do that time, this time.
Gotcha.
So when
Great.
you say that is different people going to make a difference, I think that what we're missing is that we had community members and staff members that were smaller groups that interviewed the candidates themselves and
Okay.
gave that feedback.
Got it.
Versus it being a larger forum. So that's a process we can look at. And I would like to propose that we're already 40 minutes behind this, and we've got some folks that we've got 3 other discussion items on the agenda that are very important. But this discussion, continuing this discussion, is important also, and I don't want to lose sight of that. So my proposal would be, right now, we have a plan. We have our interim superintendent in place. We have a plan and per our vote that we will come to the table in June, and if it means aligning or doing something different or pinpointing exactly what we're going to do before then, we certainly can do that. But I would propose we discuss this at a work session further at our March work session, if that's okay, because I really want to try and be mindful of everybody's time too. But I also want to be sensitive to, this is an important topic, and this is, again, this is part of the process. Sometimes it takes longer to get to where we need to be, and part of the process is having very open and honest dialogue, and raw dialogue, which is what we're having right now, and I think that's important too. So could I get a motion to put this on the agenda for March, or?
May I make one other comment?
Okay.
So I think that I would like to propose that we get together sometime in March separately for a morning or an afternoon and really hash through this.
I agree.
There's a cost of doing nothing.
Right, and
the
not
good-
having enough time.
We have a wonderful luxury that we have high-quality people in place with passion and interest in doing the work, and they've agreed to do it. And we're thankful for you guys doing that, and I certainly don't take it for granted, because you could have said no thank you. Okay? Having said that, in my opinion, only the public put us in place to do something. So let's do something.
No, I think I like the idea of us getting together and taking as long as we need to figure out what we're going to do.
Yeah, and then we can set a timeline that doesn't have to be engraved in stone, but should be our guideline for success and the criteria. And then we can decide on if we want to hire a third party to assist us with it.
That's one of the decisions.
Yeah, we should have 4 things we don't walk out without.
And can I,
Sorry, double negative.
is it too much to task everybody to establish some kind of framework of schedule? Like some kind of IMS?
Which stands for?
Integrated master schedule.
I
I'm a
don't
schedule
think we
guy.
have enough information to have a schedule yet because we don't know what we're doing.
Create one. I'm asking you what one looks like in your mind,
Gotcha.
How
So
about
we
the
can-
afternoon of March 19th?
so we can compare notes.
How about the afternoon of March 19th?
I'll be on travel.
Perfect. And let's ink it. When are you back?
March 28th.
So you're gone those 2 weeks, yeah?
Yeah.
How about the afternoon of March 14th?
I'm down. I'm open.
Why are we waiting until that late? Why don't we do it?
Yeah, let's do it in February.
Well, we could certainly do a retreat in February, although what I was going to propose is why wait that long? Why don't we dedicate our work session on March 4th to this?
I have a conflict that day in general. Could we move our work session out a week? Or on to the 7th?
I am out on the 7th.
Could we move our work session to the week of the 10th? Or you can do it without me present, which is fine. I'll just have a proxy and spend some time
No, I
with
think it's important that we as a board are working through this together, the 5 of
Agreed.
us. Were you not planning on being here on the work session for the 4th, Ron?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up with you today to see if the team would be willing to move it. I have a family commitment.
I'm open on the 11th if we have to do that.
When is spring break?
24th?
Yeah, not for a couple weeks later in March, 24th through the 28th.
So can we put on our February agenda to vote to change our work session to the 11th?
February 11th, so Sunday.
No. So our February 18th board meeting, we will vote to change our work session to the 11th.
Okay.
Vicki, could you put that on the agenda? Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Is the board considering extending the time that day?
Do we want to do it as a retreat?
Sure.
What else do we have on the agenda for the 11th work session?
Need to pull that up.
I don't know that we haven't had our
It's not
agenda
been-
setting meeting yet.
Correct. So we can be flexible.
So that's the good news.
Could we just do it that afternoon?
Do the work session in the morning and a discussion in the afternoon?
And what day
No,
is that?
just do the whole thing in the afternoon on the
So
11th.
I want to try and be at least disruptive as possible. There's been a lot of disruption already, so let's try and be consistent. Are we visiting a school on the 11th?
I don't have anything on my schedule.
Vicki, do you know when our next school visit is?
Yep, I have the schedule, just give me a moment.
I'm in the wrong year.
March 4th is actually an afternoon school visit,
Okay,
so March 11th would be free.
okay. Chris?
I'm looking. Stand by. Yeah, I'm open.
while my fellow board members are looking at timestamps, I want to be mindful of the staff we have here to do presentations. We're an hour behind schedule. We still have priority 3 safe and healthy schools update, our AI intelligence update, and our HSEA update. Is there anybody that has a firm stop that we need to rearrange our agenda on? Okay,
Yeah, the
just want to be mindful. What?
Air Force is in town.
What time
Let's-
is your hard stop, Chris?
Probably 11:30 today.
Mine's at noon.
Mine's noon.
So this is what we're going to do. Why don't you all email your dates to Ms. Wood, and then at our February board meeting, we will vote on and discuss what that discussion looks like. We're going to discuss our discussion.
Right.
But I would really like to move on. We're an hour behind already. And I recognize that this is pertinent and it's essential to have these discussions, but I do want to be very mindful, which I feel like we need to respect the time of our staff as well. No, we were supposed to discuss till, oh, we're not behind.
What?
No, yes, we are.
May I throw out a procedural thought? May I throw out a procedural suggestion?
We're 15 minutes behind, sorry.
Okay. Well done. Nice recovery. In the future, if we have this scenario, why don't we have the staff members go first?
Well, hopefully there will not be a scenario like this in the future.
There probably will.
So,
You get my point, right? I think the respect for their time and their day job is absolutely the right way for us to be looking at it.
true. I personally, I agree, but I also think that this was pretty important that we're making sure that we discuss this, but duly noted. Staff should definitely go first. Can we move on? And please, board members, will you forward your available dates to Ms. Wood? Ms. Wood, I will coordinate with you, and we will have this on our February board meeting to potentially change dates. That being said, can we move on to C2, which is Priority 3 Safe and Healthy Schools Update? Oh, do you need this?
I do not need that.
Are you ready for me to open this Google Meet?
Yes, please. We've invited Kylie Florin, and there she is. Good morning, Kylie. Thank you for joining us. Apologize for the delay. Board, thank you for this opportunity for us to go through a summary of the social emotional wellness support findings. As you may recall in a previous meeting, we engaged with practical statistics in doing an evaluation of our current setup with our supports for mental health. Kylie Florin, who is joining us today, was the lead author, working very closely with David Galvan, who did a lot of the interviews and a lot of the work within our schools. And so we're going to go through the report. We'll be as quick as possible to try to make up some time here, but we're going to go through the report, identify some highlights, and then answer any questions you might have. So without further ado, Ms. Florin, would you like to jump in and give us a little bit of background and summarize our report, please? Can you hear us?
I would take that as a no.
I would take that as a no as well. Wonder if we can do this via cell phone.
Can you hear us, Kylie?
Is this Google Meets or something?
Google Meets. Hello, Kylie. I have you on speaker. We saw you on screen, but you could not hear us, so we had some audio difficulties, but not video. So we're going to try again. Can you hear us now?
I think it's me. It's saying that I have no microphone either.
Well, if you're okay, we have you on video and we can see you just fine.
You can.
Yep,
Okay.
and so if you just leave your phone on speaker, I will microphone up the speakerphone and we can hear you just fine through the phone.
Okay. Well, my speaker is not the best, so I'm going to hold my phone like this.
Fair enough.
Hope y'all don't mind.
So, well, you couldn't hear us. I had introduced you already, you and David, as the author of this document, and I had formally handed it off to you to do a brief summary of the document and the information you have, and any recommendations you might have for the board.
Great. Thank you. I have presentation up. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I will go quickly. Right, here we go. So I had a little bit of background on how El Paso youth are struggling. Suicide is the leading cause of death among youth in El Paso County, and we've seen top stressors to include family issues, recent loss, and problems in school. So this definitely is an issue that we need to be talking about within the school district. We've seen this not only in El Paso County, but also within your school. We know that 3 in 10 don't handle stress well. We've seen that 1 in 5 don't feel part of the school community. We've also seen 1 in 5 don't feel they have an adult that they can talk to. And your high school students have told us that they're struggling with academic stress. They feel overcommitted. They are worried about their relationships with their family and their peers. And you'll see throughout that I've added page numbers. These are from this report document that you should all have a copy of if anybody wants to look further into any of this. So our project was to answer the question, what should we do about this? And so we looked into what is going well, what supports are needed, what is going on in your school district, and then we also compared that to best practices in order to come up with a recommendation that would fill the gap. So at the time that you had presented in October to the board, we had interviewed principals and done surveys with almost all of them. And we had reviewed the student data that you had collected through your internal survey. Since then, we've also done focus groups with the high school students, and we've gotten feedback from counseling and mental health staff. And so the recommendations we compared that against were from Mental Health Colorado, just because this is such a broad topic, we needed to put some boundaries on it. And then we also added some other state and local best practice recommendations that we were aware of. So here are the topics covered in the school mental health toolkit. I'm not going to read them, and you've seen them before. And you'll see that the topics that we included in our report have changed just slightly in order to better accommodate our findings. So we did find strengths. We found social emotional learning support in your classrooms and also positive behavioral management support. You'll notice that we have not spoken with teachers, so this is just what we have assumed based on what we've learned at the school level, that this is happening at all classrooms. That is something that I would definitely verify. We've also seen a lot of support from all levels for training and growth. Everyone has been very positive about this project and open to ideas and suggestions for improving. These are our main gaps that we have found. We definitely need more teacher involvement. Like I said, we didn't talk to teachers. Teachers are critical because they're face-to-face with the students, and so they need to have wellness among themselves. They need to be supported in their own mental health. They also have an opportunity to give feedback about what they are seeing among the students that they're working with day to day. And so we also need to train and equip teachers. to be able to handle what they are seeing among their students and know what to do. Another gap that we identified was a standard screening and referral process. That process would include some way to identify students who need support, have standard protocols to get them help, and then sufficient and reliable resources to back that up. The third gap was what we call the cowboy culture. It's that thought that we're all responsible for ourselves, for our own outcomes. We solve our own problems. We celebrate the hero, the individual who overcomes. And in order to have a supportive mental health environment, we need it to be, we're all in this together. We support one another. We care for one another. It's okay to ask for help. So our recommendations follow the gaps pretty well. Our first step would be to engage teachers. Let's have a conversation with them about what they're seeing, what they need, and to offer them training. Youth mental health first aid would be a perfect first training for teachers. It is first aid, so it doesn't teach them how to be counselors. It teaches them how to identify students who need to go on and get deeper support. And then we need to equip them by giving them someone to pass students off to. So you have some resources within your district, but you could use more, especially if we're about to tell every teacher that they need to start sending more referrals. All right, the first step that we're recommending is increasing your availability of mental health services. So this is very big and complicated and involves a lot of different recommendations. And so our overarching recommendation is to get someone who would be responsible for this. A lot of districts are hiring a mental health services coordinator who can help streamline your internal capacity and then also bring in external support, such as creating MOUs with external providers. And that way you can have continuity of care. So if your school sends a student outside for help, that treatment plan can come back to the school and the school can know how to be supporting that student and to follow up with the provider about what they're seeing. There are many other roles that this mental health services coordinator could participate in, and that's kind of littered throughout of our report. All right, the last one that I have here is a culture shift. So around each student, we have their teacher, we have their family, we have sports or other after-school activities, we have their friends. And so we really need to be working on engaging all of these different aspects of their life to have a positive view toward help seeking and toward mental health and mental health care. So this could involve parent engagement, maybe endorsing parent academies where they can learn about topics that are of interest to them as parents, and also including mental health topics. And then I guess I had one more. It is to collect data. If you can't measure something, you can't understand it. If you can't understand it, you can't control it. If you can't control it, you can't improve it. There are tons of quotes like this around business process improvement, and the same applies to anything that you want to improve on. We need a direct measure of your students' mental health, and it would be best to get that from the students or also from teachers as to what they're seeing among their students. We would also recommend measuring teacher mental health. All right, so we had additional next steps. These are other topics that are included in the report that for the sake of time I won't go into right now, but you're welcome to read. And overall, my recommendation would be to harness this existing momentum. We've seen a lot of momentum among everyone that we've spoken to. There's a lot of interest in creating a shift and improving the way that your students are being cared for in their mental health. So I think the time is right to take hold of that and make a change. So here's our contact information. I went pretty fast so that you would have time for questions if you would like to ask any.
President Upchurch, if you wouldn't mind, I would like to jump in, and as I've had an opportunity to digest this report, and there's a couple things that I would like to highlight through the lens of student services. And first of all, Ms. Florin and Mr. Galvin, thank you. This has been a tremendous support for us. I can't tell you how much we value this input. But you may remember last May, we brought a student panel in to this work session meeting in which the student panel made a recommendation for youth mental health first aid. And Ms. Florin, in this document that she authored and in the work they have done, no fewer than 6 times recommended youth mental health first aid. So I think we were on the right track in the spring. I think this report affirms that we're in the right track now, and I do not want to delay any longer in getting that process moving. The youth mental health first aid, if you may recall, is designed exactly what Ms. Florin said, is to prepare our teachers to identify risk factors and help make a referral to a provider who can assist students who are having those risk factors. One of the things I'm concerned about is that our teachers are seeing concerns with students and they don't know what to do with that. So as step one, we would like to train our teachers. We would like to help them become better at understanding on what to look for, and then if they see something of concern, what to do with that. So that would be step number one that I would like us to consider, and quite frankly, I do not want to delay because I see an urgency and a need for taking care of our kids in this area. Secondly, from a short-term perspective, I heard clearly from Ms. Florin that we need to involve more teacher input. It was an intentional decision to not provide a questionnaire to our teachers in the fall because of questionnaire fatigue. They were being asked a lot of questionnaires. We had a lot going on. I would like to work with the executive team here to find a good time and a good process to get more teacher input, which would then lead to the recommendation Ms. Florin made around getting data collection review, making sure we have the right questions being asked and we're collecting the right data, both for our staff and our teachers. And then lastly, the one thing I'd like to do immediately is develop a more robust referral process for students in needs and families in needs. So I believe, and what I've heard from the practical statistics crew, is that we've got a lot of good things in place. We just need to formalize it, standardize it, and make it more universal across the district. So Palmer Lake has the same access to resources as Prairie Winds and so on and so forth. Does that make sense? So those would be the 4 steps in short-term, immediate response to this report. And then from a long-term, I would like to work with the executive team to dig into the recommendation for more mental health administrative support. You'll see that's embedded a few times in this document. I think that's a bigger lift and is going to take more resources and more expertise. And I would like to work with the executive team in determining exactly what those needs are, really operationalizing those needs and present those to you at a later time to assess if in fact that's necessary. Do you have any questions about that component?
Thank you both, first of all. This is big stuff, right? Couple questions that are sort of interrelated, so I'm going to ask them together with the hope that maybe there's a summary level answer. One is a big challenge in what you've talked about, Mr. Frampton, is institutionalizing this and making it part of our DNA, provided it's successful. And to that point, one of my questions is, I remember the quote was great, right? You can't measure it till you understand it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do we have a feeling for where we are in terms of current state? And do we have an objective in mind for where we want the desired state to be and maintained? And I'm wondering if that doesn't give us some framework with which to work. That's sort of my primary question around it. And the second piece is, at least in the years I've been on the board, this has been a top of mind topic. And I've also attempted to ask that we look at this from a overall student productivity metric. Right? We happen to have one of our high school principals here, so it's very applicable to ask you a couple of questions. In your environment, Dr. Frank, if there is a way to reduce student struggles by as little as 10% during the school year, during the school day, what percent of raw teaching hours does that give us back on a macro basis for your student population?
Yeah, I mean, research is clear when a student is not emotionally or mentally well, their brain is not ready or even capable of learning. So we hear this as the #1 request from students. And I do think it has more than just mental health. I think it is social, emotional, dealing with stress, dealing with misled perspectives, even societal perspectives. So just helping our kids to gather healthy adult skills while they're under our care in high school, I think is a really important priority that every educator I know believes in. So a lot of instructional capability could be increased if we do this well.
So you didn't give me a hard answer, probably by design.
Yeah, it's an infinite. It'd be quite infinite, especially for a student who is truly struggling. We have more and more online requests, quite significant, of students who are hospitalized due to mental health concerns and then have to make a decision to continue the remainder of the semester online. And we authorize those. We support the dollars to do that. But a lot of learning is lost. I can't give you a number, but a lot of learning is lost when students don't feel well.
Right, and so that's my point, right? I guess I'll make a request, and the rest of the board can choose to outvote it or jump in with it because it's just one person's request. I would like us to also look at this from a productivity standpoint, not just is a bad word, not purely social emotional wellness, because I think they go hand in hand. And for those that don't have kids in the district anymore, that is still something that's very valuable to our stakeholders. And it's very valuable when we're trying to increase our academic position versus have it stay where it has just moved to, right? So that's thing one. Thing two is the art of this, which I'm asking the question out of raw ignorance. A lot of social, emotional wellness and struggling begins outside of the classroom and outside of the dynamics in school. What percent of this does the research believe, the credible research, believe that we can control or impact or influence? Really same desired outcome with different verbs.
Ms. Florin, did you hear that question? Do you happen to know the answer to that from a research perspective?
The question was, what percent of externally motivated mental health struggle can be mitigated by internal supports within the school?
Yeah, that's what I heard.
I have never seen a number put on that. But what we do know is that one of the best protective factors for mental health struggles is having an adult that you can turn to and feel supported by.
Safe adult.
And we know that district-wide, you're already training all of your teachers in capturing kids' hearts, which is telling your teachers to become that adult for their students. And they spend so much time each day with their students, even at the upper levels. They see them so many hours within the year. That if teachers can become those adults even better by knowing what to do when they're seeing those students struggle, they can catch all of the ones who are starting to fall through the cracks and get them to help. But no, to answer your question, I've never seen that particular statistic before. Social research is hard.
I'll mention that we do conduct a student survey as well, and exactly what Ms. Florin is referring to as far as our students feeling like they have an adult to connect with in the schools is one of the questions we ask. So we do have additional data that I know Mr. Frampton is planning to share later on in the school year that will help us make decisions about how we're impacting students in this realm moving forward.
Yeah,
That was your data. It's on page 26.
Oh, it's in the report. Thank you.
Yes.
so some of that information from our student survey is embedded in this report.
So that might give us a way to have current state and desired state, yes?
Yes.
Would it be asking too much to ask for us to have a current state and desired state the next time we get an update on this project?
No, I think that would be in alignment with us summarizing the results. I guess one of the things I want to process and ponder is we're going to do a post, we did a pre-survey or a spring survey, and we're going to follow that up with a fall survey. We're going to follow that up with a spring survey. And I really do want to take a look at how things have changed over the course of the year and the effectiveness of our interventions.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if we wouldn't want to wait until we have that data to talk about current state and see if there's been any movement of that data, either positively or otherwise. And I suspect that will happen in late April.
Yeah. With full respect for the fact that social emotional wellness is not a binary thing.
Right.
It's not either good or bad. It's still moving the ball in the right direction. Will be good for the kids, good for the teachers, and I'm a believer it will enhance our productivity in the classroom, which then means at least a majority of our students will be in a position to absorb more than if we did nothing. So not only do our scores go up, but they become better members of their communities when they grow up and move on, which is our ultimate goal.
Said. Ms. Florin?
I also wanted to point out that it's difficult for how broad these topics were, but in the body of our report, which begins on page 7, within each of the areas we talk about, we show the best practice and then what you all are doing. So that's kind of desired state and then current state before we jump in with next steps, which are our recommendations.
Do we have results around the best practice?
We do not have numbers attached to the best practices.
Would it be asking too much before we made that a desired state if we knew what it looked like?
Sometimes, often it's, do you have it or do you not?
Pardon me?
Some of them are very yes, no.
I didn't get that.
Yeah, it's a binary all or nothing kind of thing where, so I'm not, can you reframe that question? Because I have
Yeah,
no time following that.
It's hard to define a desired state off of best practice until you know the best practice is effective in our environment.
I see.
Okay. And so what I would like to see us consider is, this is where we're at. If we, in our next survey, get 10% less students feeling stressed about X, Y, and Z, then conversely, our teachers should be 10% more productive. And we should have 10% more attentive student hours. in our classroom, give or take. And that's a good thing for there's a win across the board. And that's what I'm trying to get to, right? Something that's good for the kids, good for the teachers, good for the district, and ultimately enables the students when they step out of our buildings at the end of their experience here to be better contributors to their community, which is part of our core goals. It's probably our number one core goal outside of physical safety.
Well,
You guys concur?
I'm not quite sure. I'm not following.
well, Mr. Swartz, my response to that would be, obviously, we have 8 areas that were highlighted with best practices associated with that. And those best practices have come out of the research. That's why we hired practical statistics. And I'm trusting that Ms. Floren's work has really highlighted and is basing that on national data that goes beyond Lewis Palmer. And that's the one thing that was missing prior to having this report in place. When I suggested our short-term responses, I took a look at A, what are our biggest needs in Lewis Palmer? And B, what are some methodologies that we can employ that will happen quickly so we're moving forward and taking care of kids as soon and as quickly as possible, because waiting longer doesn't feel right to me. So when I made the recommendations around starting up youth mental health first aid, developing a data collection process, it really isn't with an intent to answer your question with our own inside data. But I think we need to get moving before I can give you any hard and fast information. We've got some baseline data. We've got what I believe is a clear sense. Mr. Galvin interviewed our kids, interviewed our administrators, interviewed our counselors. And I think the right people's voice is in the room to start putting some action to this.
So in looking at this, I'm seeing pretty clear best practices, and they are yes, no. We're doing this or we're not doing this. And not necessarily that you would do everything, because budgets don't tend to allow for that. But, you know, the answer to how are kids doing is not yes, no, but we can tell whether putting things into place that are good practice for student mental health results in I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff like I remember that one of the indicators in a workplace of good training on technology use is reduced calls to the help desk. You know, it was just one of maybe 16 that you start looking at. And so it's not one particular number, as is often the case with things that are very nuanced. There isn't one particular number. There's many numbers that you would expect to change. You're not going to get to, well, you know, we've got 10% better mental health. I mean, you just can't say that. It's not something you can say. But you can say we have few teachers report fewer students that they're really concerned about, you know, that are on their radar and about for worry, those sorts of things. So while I understand that you would like to get to a number, there's many numbers. And I think what I hear Mr. Frampton saying is we're going to implement some of these things and see what changes happen, but that this document that I'm looking at has a list of those. It's in there. It's available.
Yeah, well said, Dr. Shank. I appreciate that input. When we talk about best practices, one of the things I would like to lay out is like 90 days. Which best practices can we implement within the next 90 days because of the urgency in which I'm personally feeling that we want to get moving? Which of these could we implement in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and create a path? Because I think in an ideal situation, we would implement all of the best practices. I mean, I think our standard needs to be at that point, but the question is how quickly can we get there and do it well? And I think that would be one of the outcomes I would like to work on and present to you the next time I have the opportunity to.
And those outcomes can then serve as impetus for further action. You know, from what I've read, you know, student home situations are a big one. And we can use this data, or the data can be used to let parents know what's going on with their kids.
Which, I'm going to piggyback off of your statement because that was my question. When you're going through this, I actually focused, I appreciate this presentation because what I focused on in the report was pages 26 on the findings from the student survey of how many students know that somebody cares about them and how many students, and then the measure of personal well-being, and then I found number 27, how can adults better engage students during these challenging times? And those key themes is what I found most interesting, which was phone addiction education. And that we've already seen our building starting on that with phone addiction education. And working at and looking at, one of the ones I found interesting was check-ins, avoid unsolicited advice. So, and the reason I focused on avoid unsolicited advice is because I want to make sure that two things. When we're talking about training teachers, I understand the urgency of this, by the way. Putting another thing on a teacher's plate, what does that look like in the normal education day for them? Knowing that we already need to work on teacher pay, and then making sure that they feel that we're focusing on students, also focusing on our teachers, on what they have on their plate. Because if you're not healthy, you're not able to help somebody else who's healthy. And my other question is parents. In this entire discussion, I understand that this is the focus on what does an educational day look like for our kids, but anecdotally, me as a parent, what I found to be the most valuable and what I love about District 38 is when my child or when a child is struggling, that the building administrators, Dr. Frank, Eric Purdy, just picking on you because you're here, so picking on Palmer Ridge, immediately leaned into us as parents and immediately partnered with us as parents, because some parents don't. Ultimately, our students' education is directed by our moms and our dads and our guardians. Our parents are in charge of their students' education. And so without that parent sign-off and buy-in and partnership, then I think all of this is for naught unless you have the parents engaged in this.
Well said. And if you look at page 15 in the report, Ms. Florin is very specific at addressing parent engagement. And one of the things about the youth mental health first aid, and one of the reasons I'm excited about pursuing that, is there's an opportunity for us to train our community members and parents in that. And I've talked to some parents that have been trained in youth mental health first aid, and they've just reflected on the value that's had as a parent of their own children, but also their children's friends, because now our parents are educated on the areas of concern through mental health that they need to look for in their own kids and their kids' friends.
And I know that mental health first aid is important. Is there, when we're engaging with our parents, is there, how do our parents lean into this? If let's say a parent says, you know what, I don't want a teacher to have I don't want, let's just hypothetically put it out there. If a parent says, I don't want a teacher to be my student's first point of contact in the school, or safe adult, I want to be the safe adult. I, as a parent, make sure that my kids do have somebody that they feel comfortable with in their buildings, because I think that they're in our buildings. So I just wanted, again, I just want to make sure that I appreciate that. I missed that on slide 15, and I apologize, because it's very important to me that parents are engaged and involved.
Absolutely, and in order for us to do what Mr. Schwartz was referring to as a change in culture, an infusion into our culture, our parents are a major part of our culture. And I do think that we need to make sure we're individualizing our response so parents can be as involved as they need to be. And that is not lost on us, and that's a very essential point in as far as when we talk about identifying a concern and handing it off. Our teachers are not going to be the mental health providers when there's a concern. They're going to be handing that off, and the parent is always involved in the next steps and what does that look like, and has the authority to drive that, and how involved are we going to be as a school or not be involved as a school. So that is not lost on us, and those practices are currently in place, and I feel confident that we wouldn't be changing our response to the concerns, but what I think we would really be focusing on is identifying the concerns earlier so we can respond quicker.
Okay. And then my one other question is, when you talked about collecting data, the other big concern to make sure that we're being mindful of is, when we say collecting data, we're not talking about collecting data for a third party. We're talking about how are we making sure that we're serving our kids internally for our parents and partnership with our educators.
Yes, if we were to make a proposal to do any external, and you'll see that the Colorado survey is a recommendation in here. If we were ever to pursue that recommendation moving forward, we would, of course, involve the board in that decision along with the executive team. So there is no intention of changing our data collection methodology right now. Right now, our student survey is internal. One of the things I would like to evaluate and work with Ms. Florin and Practical Statistics on is, are we asking the right questions within that survey? And as you may recall from the fall, and we'll do it again this spring, parents have the ability to see those questions and opt out of that survey at any point.
Okay.
So that will not ever change.
Thank you, that's comforting. Okay, so, anything else we need to, before we move on?
Now, from my perspective, Ms.
Okay.
Florin, is there any final comments that you would like to make?
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this. I think it's an exciting time for your district, and I hope you keep us posted on what you move forward with.
Thank you very
Yep.
much.
Thank you, Ms. Florin.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Rick. I know that there's a lot of work that has gone into this too. And I know that I like what you guys said, that if our students aren't healthy, they're not learning. Next up, we would like to ask our Palmer Ridge High School principal, Dr. Adam Frank, and our Lewis Palmer Middle School instructional coach, Ms. Seaborn, and you'll be presenting information regarding the work of the AI Policy Task Force, including recommendations and practices and procedures for D38 students and staff. And this is an ongoing process, right? So this is just step one of, I saw your timeline, so. All right, take it away.
I'm going to jump in real quick. This microphone is really loud. Just to ground us in the committee work that we currently have going on in the district, and to thank all of our staff, our students, and community members who are currently serving on committees across the district. We've recently updated this visual to reflect the committees that are currently working on tasks throughout the district. So you'll notice the AI Policy Task Force represented here. And as a reminder, task force groups are committees that come together to get a specific project done. So they're not typically ongoing groups, but they have a mission and they accomplish that mission. And that is what Dr. Frank and Ms. Seaborn are here to share with you today. So I'll hand it over to them.
Awesome.
And then, yes, there we go.
Okay, well, thank you for having Alexi and I here with you today, school board, so we appreciate that. Also, no apologies needed for other topics being discussed. We are employed here, and we're happy to do our good part, so no apologies needed. So with this topic, we did have put together an AI task force. We're going to talk about that committee, that task force, and how it proceeded and the results from it, and present that to you. Funny, I wasn't planning on saying this, but in the spirit of not doing what's easy, which was talked about in a lot of detail, it would have been easy for us to sit back and do nothing with AI. That would have been very easy, and I think it's what a lot of educational institutions are currently doing. Maybe they're wise, I don't know. But we did not do that. Instead, we refused to do that, and I'm proud to say that our district, and this task force in particular, had the vision and the resolve to lead the way. And what we're going to share with you, I'm also very proud to say that I think in the state of Colorado, we are among a small group who are taking a lead in next steps. And we can discuss with questions and such of what it may be looking like in other districts. The Gazette just came out with an article a day ago talking about some of the work in D20 and D2. Denver Public Schools has been involved in some work. I actually believe D2 started about a year ago. But the work that districts are choosing is looking different because this is evolving quite quickly. But I feel confident with the work of this committee and involving the executive team that where